Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we continue our dialogue on artificial intelligence, machine learning, the benefits to humanity, the challenges to humanity, and how we understand, in the first instance, technology that we ourselves have unleashed, but whose potential and impact is happening more rapidly and more astonishingly than we ever imagined, such that Geoffrey Hinton, one of the godfathers of artificial intelligence, quit Google several weeks ago so that he could speak out, and has said that artificial intelligence is now of a more urgent concern than even climate change, because it is happening at such an accelerated rate that the future is now here. This hit me with some force on Friday evening after our session with Noel Munson on artificial intelligence. I went to a grocery store and was waiting in line to pay at the cashier. And I was standing behind two teenage girls. And they were clearly in high school level, and they were chatting very intensely back and forth about Chat GPT and who they knew was using it in the school, and how some of them had actually begun to write term papers and essays and doing their homework. And it was as if I had this image of Eve, getting ready to bite the apple in the Garden of Eden, as these two girls were, clearly excited and knew that there was some boundary that they were transgressing around using Chat GPT. And then they noticed that I was listening very, very intently, and they stopped, and I interceded and said, "Carry on. I'm fascinated by Chat GPT, and I've not used it, but this is motivating me to get more deeply concerned." And then we carried on the conversation, and I think we all agreed that it was something that was now here, and how we interact with it in an ethical and moral way, which was the contribution I made to the contribution, was really of crucial importance. So we're going to continue our conversation today by looking at the realm of education. And I know that many of you out there in the Humanity Rising universe, and particularly in our Zoom group that comes on the actual Zoom call every day, are educators, and so would love to expand the conversation to include you if you'd like to join. We're going to start with Georg Boch, our Director of Technology for Ubiquity, and the CTO for Humanity Rising, has some ideas and will be making a presentation. So we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and the world of learning and the world of education today. So thank you for joining us. We'll start, as we always do, by just simply breathing together. In the midst of all the tumult and chaos out there, the least we can do is breathe consciously and coherently to bring balm to our souls. So welcome, everyone. Let us breathe together, and then we'll begin our program. Thank you, everyone. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my very good friend and colleague, Georg Boch, without whose technical proficiency HR wouldn't be happening, is the simple fact of the matter. And so it's through Georg, actually, that we've been opening up our exploration of artificial intelligence. He's been in the leadership group and formulating our programs, particularly the ones that are coming up beginning in late June with Columbia University and the Rockefeller Foundation, et cetera. So Georg, I want to thank you for your attentiveness on this matter of technology. And what Georg is going to do is just give us a presentation about AI tutorial capacity, and then we'll engage in a dialogue. And again, those of you who are educators out there, I'm sure you have opinions and points of view, so we'd like to include those as well. And just put a word in the chat if you'd like to join the conversation in any way. So Georg, welcome once again to Humanity Rising, and take it from here.
Thank you, Jim. Well, thank you, guys. This is really an exciting topic. I'm going to spotlight myself so you guys can see me. Well, I really think it's great that we had this conversation starter on the entire subject of AI on Friday, right? I know who of you guys were there on Friday. Maybe put something in the chat so I can see if most of the audience still has this kind of in their operating memory from Friday, because what we heard on Friday was a great overview on kind of the general situation of this AI development. And what I want to try to do today is to try to express some points on the application of this technology in education, specifically on this dilemma that we have, or many educators find themselves in the age of ChatGPT. And then I will actually showcase a tutor technology and an AI tutor that basically is a script that you paste into ChatGPT-4 and then gives very precise instructions to ChatGPT how to act like a tutor. Okay, Jane says she wasn't there on Friday. Well, basically what we heard on Friday was just an overview on all the different areas of potential and also potential disaster in AI. It's you can watch it on YouTube. So to start this conversation, I think what you guys all have heard is that there is a kind of outcry in the education world that students are using ChatGPT to write their essays, right? So I'm going to share my screen and just go through a few basic points. Let me see if you can see that. So what generative AI, like ChatGPT, but there are many technologies that are now coming to the front, offers, is that it really challenges this knowledge transfer scheme. So the idea that we're going to have students read a book and then paraphrase or rephrase what they have learned, right, or what they have basically considered as their input in an essay. Many students don't want to do it, and this is why even Tesla CEO Elon Musk tweeted that AI is the end of homework, which is, of course, a kind of weird position to have. Go on here to the next slide. Oops. Yeah. So what has happened in the last 6 months, which is crazy to say because GPT was released in November, is that there are kind of 3 teams of educators that have formed themselves, right? So the first team is this, what you can call Team Avoid. They have decided that they're going to just avoid or ignore the existence of this technology. saying that every essay now in school or university has to be written by hand, in presence of someone who can check that no cell phone is being used, and on paper. And if you think this situation to the bitter end, it basically means that then we will exclude students from text processing, meaning that they cannot use text processing anymore. They cannot write on when they want to write. They have to write in a specific time frame and without any avoidance, without using text processing. And they have to do so basically in elementary school until they do their PhD thesis. Because of course, the situation is not gonna get any better with these technologies. And if we think this to the end, we would then release students into a world where they then, after they've done their thesis at university, are able to use the technology for the first time. So if we think through this, we then wouldn't be actually preparing students for the world that they will inhabit. We would create an artificial bubble of a learning world in which this technology doesn't exist, that is actually disassociated from the working world. So that's team avoid. Then there's team ban it. So that is the undertaking of using artificial intelligence. The irony, so Team Bennett wants to use artificial intelligence to ironically detect AI-generated work. So this is already happening today when it comes to plagiarism in a more simplistic form, where students copy and paste articles from other essays to put their work together. The issue is that it's really a cat and mouse game where the technology that pretends that a text has not been written by AI evolves as quickly as the one that can realize if it has been written by AI. So what this means is that if you think through this approach in the long term, it means that we concentrate all our efforts on keeping the current system intact. And it's actually very sorry, it's very problematic to even realize if a text has been written by an AI or not, in the sense that what happens if you just paraphrase a few of the words? Does it still mean it's been written by a human being or not? How can you prove you wrote it yourself? What if you're wrongfully accused? What if basically, you use quotations and that gets you then a wrong kind of a bad outcome at your university because the algorithm thinks you used AI to write this. So there are many problems that arise here. And it kind of distracts from the actual idea of education, which would be to have learning experiences that go beyond this knowledge transfer scheme, right? And then the third camp, we could call it team embrace, and they acknowledge the presence and potential of AI and seek to educate students about it. And today I will try to go a little bit in the potentials of Camp 3. So some technologies in Camp 3 really take advantage of adaptive learning. And adaptive learning is, of course, an idea that we at Ubiquity have always hold very dearly. And it is something that is now being turned into AI applications, such as Khan's Academy. They created a bot that's called Khan-Migo. Khan Academy is an online university that really focuses on kind of high school education, arithmetic, mathematics, stuff like this, and also the Microsoft Reading Coach. So what do we mean with this adaptive learning? This really goes back to to Benjamin Bloom, a great learning theorist, some of you might know. And the idea is really that if we are able to adapt the learning material to the students' kind of natural interests and excitements, and have a personal rapport to their kind of inherent intrinsic motivation, we will have exponentially better outcomes than if we have this sage on a stage cookie cutter approach of learning, which was really born in the industrial age, where we had the necessity to teach hundreds of students, no, maybe 50 students in one class in a working class environment, so they could grow up and become factory workers, right? Basically, we have not changed our primary mode of education to the knowledge society that we're in, here in the first world at least. And now we're being disrupted by whatever's next. That's somehow not just knowledge worker education, because somehow AI is threatening most of the knowledge worker jobs, funny enough. So we're in this double disruption that's happening. So enough speaking from my side. I will now use this code here and paste it into ChatGPT. This is a script that was written by a developer in the AI open source world. And it is an interesting example of prompt engineering, which means it is written in the style of a computer language. It's called JSON, this style, but it uses AI prompting. So it uses natural language with all its depth of meaning and interpretation in the format of a computer language. And so this script here, which I will now paste into ChatGPT, so that ChatGPT can transform itself into a teacher, has different opportunities or options on how you want to learn. You can see here in the back end, I'm showing you guys how it thinks about learning. So it has different levels of depth, from surface level, covering basic topics, to cutting edge research. It has different learning styles it supports, from reflective learning to verbal learning to intuitive learning to sequential learning, meaning that you could possibly adapt this bot to the learning style of your students. It has different communication styles that are laid out here. You could have this thing in a Socratic dialogue, or more in a textbook formal approach, or in a humorous approach, even in the storytelling approach. So enough talk. I will copy this and we'll paste it into GPT-4. See if this works. Send this. So now I will go down. And we see here, hello, I'm Mr. Randier. I'm an AI tutor created by so-and-so. Let's configure your preferences for the best learning experience. And now imagine that this technology is now actively being transported to smartphones. So it's absolutely already now for certain people with enough coding knowledge to have the ability to have this model without internet connection running on a cutting edge smartphone that costs maybe $400, $500 today and will cost 10 euros next year or in 2 years. So this is what we're going to see now, is possibly something any person in the third world can have in their hands, in even speaking to them without this clunky interface that we see here. Okay, just for you to be aware of it. So what do we have here? It introduces itself. And now I can basically create my learning menu. What is the depth I want to have here? What is the learning style? What is the reasoning framework? What is the tone, right? So let's say I would like to learn about the European Renaissance, right? That's a fun subject. But I'm a really visual person. and I want to be engaged. So let's say we're going to do something with Socratic dialogue. I am fairly confident about the subject, so let's say I'm going to make a level 5. So let's just answer. Hi there. I would like to learn about the Renaissance period. Use Socratic dialogue and a visual approach. Let's see if we can do something with this. Thank you for sharing your preferences. It sounds like you're interested in exploring the Renaissance period using Socratic dialogue for communication and a visual learning style. Well, it says here something about not being able to use the visual plugin. So I'm going to use a different reasoning framework. Of course, this only happens when you want to show it. I'm going to tell him, let's continue in the Socratic dialogue. So the level of depth is something you have to put in now. Level of depth, 5. 10 is the maximum. 10 is supposed to be like expert level knowledge, and 1 is like kindergarten. So I think we can choose level 5 here. Yeah. Level 5. Okay. So we will now approach the Renaissance period at level 5. Yeah, it wants me to set the tone of the discussion. So is it supposed to be debate? Is it supposed to be friendly? Is it supposed to be neutral? Is it supposed to be encouraging? And then it would like me to choose a reasoning framework. So I really like that to be informative, because I want it to be clear and precise. And now I say I would like to be I would like the reasoning framework to be analogical, because I like to make these kind of draw these type of conclusions. And now it asks me again the depth. And now it starts running something. Let's start. Excellent. Let's embark on our journey through the Renaissance period. Firstly, the Renaissance period in European history is marking the transition from the Middle Ages to modernity, covering the 15th and 16th century. It occurred after the crisis of the late Middle Ages and was associated with great social changes. Now let's start our Socratic dialogue. Can you think of a period in human history that might be comparable to the Renaissance, and why? This is an exercise in analogical reasoning where we try to draw parallels between situations or concepts. Your answer will help shape our subsequent discussion. Okay, well, it puts me pretty much on the spot here. I think the rise of the industrial age might be comparable. Make sure I don't make any typos here. And hope he likes my answer. Excellent analogy. The transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance and the shift from agrarian society to industrialized civilization during the Industrial Revolution indeed share similarities. Both periods were times of profound social, cultural, and technological change, leading to new forms of art, culture, and industry. And so on and so on. Now, another question for me. Okay, can you identify any specific technological or sociological advancements during the two periods that might be parallel to each other? Oh my God, this is pretty tough. Jim, can you help me here? Any ideas of any specific technological or social advancements during the Renaissance industrialization that could be drawn here in parallel? Wow.
Try
Or we can do something wrong. Just do it plain wrong and see if it understands. It's like the.
I think let's go. How about the social advancements of democracy in both the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution? See what it says. This is very cool, Georg.
Yeah, and especially if you think that this will be with voice output very soon, and on any subject that you could possibly think of. Absolutely, the democratization of society was significant parallel in both periods. The Renaissance, the concept of democracy, was re-explored, largely influenced by the rediscovery of study of works from ancient Greece and Rome. The periods saw the advance of humanism, which emphasized the value of potential of the individual, blah, 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 blah. So you could have an ongoing dialogue with this thing, an endless dialogue, and on any subject you might like. And right now, what this doesn't do yet is to shift the thinking style to like on the fly. So we could say now, enough Socratic dialogue, help me understand this in a different manner, right? Because let's remember that it understands different types of reasoning. Just to finish this up, show you one more time the different types of reasoning that we could do here. So we could say here, let's now say we're not going to use anymore this Socratic approach. Let's say we're going to use a layman approach, or yeah, or I think that's worth one last try. Help me remember 10 important facts about the Renaissance. Time and place, okay, something we remembered of the Renaissance, 14th to 17th century, cultural rebirth, okay? And now imagine this being connected to your phone or your cell phone in general. As you drive to class, it could help you remember these points, right? It could say, let's go through our conversation last night and quiz me on the basic concepts that constitute the Renaissance period. And you would have it in your ear, riding on the bus. And you could have an ongoing, complex conversation that remembers everything you have kind of worked on together. So it goes here through time and space, cultural rebirth, humanism, acoustic development. So you can even kind of zoom into these subjects now, right? And soon it will show you images and so on and so forth. So I hope I will share a link to this thing in the chat, and you can all play around with it. If you have GPT-4, it even works somewhat with GPT 3.5, which is free. So I just thought it would be important to share this. Kurt Kruger asked, will it be able to do voice interactions along with the texting? Yes, I mean, there are already certain plugins right now that allow you for an AI voice to read out what you have, what it tells you, and we're on the verge of being able to talk to these ourselves. One of the benefits of AI is that voice-to-speech recognition, it has really become much, much better. As I've tried out in tools like Speechify. So because it understands context now, it really, really nails what you're trying to say. So this is at the brink of where we're going. I'm still sharing my screen, right? Or am I not? So One more thing I would like to leave you with is a tiny part of a presentation that was done by the CEO of Khan Academy, who launched a professional product which is called Khan. And they're also working on it. In fact, a lot of people are working on it. And education is considered by many experts one of the killer apps of AI. So I will show you just a few seconds of this nice little TED Talk so you can get a sense of what these people are saying.
So anyone who's been paying attention for the last few months has been seeing headlines like this, especially in education. The thesis has been students are going to be using ChatGPT and other forms of AI to cheat, do their assignments, they're not going to learn, and it's going to completely undermine education as we know it. Now, what I'm going to argue today is not only are there ways to mitigate all of that, if we put the right guardrails, we do the right things, we can mitigate it, but I think we're at the cusp of using AI for probably the biggest positive transformation that education has ever seen. And the way we're going to do that is by giving every student on the planet an artificially intelligent but amazing personal tutor, and we're going to give every teacher on the planet an amazing artificially intelligent teaching assistant. And just to appreciate how big of a deal it would be to give everyone a personal tutor, I show you this clip from Benjamin Bloom's 1984 2 Sigma study, or he called it the 2 Sigma problem. The 2 sigma comes from 2 standard deviations, sigma the symbol for standard deviation, and he had good data that showed that, look, a normal distribution, that's the one that you see in the traditional bell curve right in the middle, that's how the world kind of sorts itself out, that if you were to give personal one-to-one tutoring for students, then you can actually get a distribution that looks like that right. It says tutorial one-to-one with the asterisk, like that right distribution, a 2 standard deviation improvement. Just to put that in plain language, that could take your average student and turn them into an exceptional student. It can take your below average student and turn them into an above average student. Now, the reason why he framed it as a problem was he said, well, this is all good, but how do you actually scale group instruction this way? How do you actually give it to everyone in an economic way? What I'm about to show you is, I think, the first moves towards doing that. Obviously, we've been trying to approximate it in some way at Khan Academy for over a decade now, but I think we're at the cusp of accelerating it dramatically. I'm going to show you the early stages of what our AI, which we call Khan, what it can now do, and maybe a little bit of where it is actually going. So this right over here is a traditional exercise that you or many of your children might have seen on Khan Academy. But what's new is that little bot thing at the right. And we'll start by seeing one of the very important safeguards, which is the conversation is recorded and viewable by your teacher. It's moderated actually by a second AI. And also, it does not tell you the answer. It is not a cheating tool. Notice, when the student says, tell me the answer, it says, I'm your tutor. What do you think is the next step for solving the problem? Now, if the student makes a mistake, and this will surprise people who think large language models are not good at mathematics, notice not only does it notice the mistake, it asks the student to explain their reasoning, but it's actually doing what I would say not just even an average tutor would do, but an excellent tutor would do. It's able to divine what is probably the misconception in that student's mind, that they probably didn't use the distributive properly. Remember, we need to distribute the -2 to both the 9 and the 2m inside of the parentheses.
People think learning piano takes a really long time, but that's false. Here's how long it really takes with this new method.
This to me is a very, very, very big deal, and it's not just in math. This is a computer programming exercise on Khan Academy where the student needs to make the clouds part. And so we can see the student starts defining a variable, left x minus minus. It only made the left cloud part, but then they can ask Khan, what's going on? Why is only the left cloud moving? And it understands the code. It knows all the context of what the student is doing, and it understands that those ellipses are there to draw clouds, which I think is kind of mind-blowing. And it says, to make the right cloud move as well, try adding a line of code inside the draw function that increments the right x variable by 1 pixel in each frame. Now, this one is maybe even more amazing because we have a lot of math teachers, we've all been trying to teach the world to code, but there aren't a lot of computing teachers out there. And what you just saw, even when I'm tutoring my kids when they're learning to code, I can't help them this well, this fast. This is really going to be a super tutor. And it's not just exercises, it understands what you're watching. It understands the context of your video. It can answer the age-old question, why do I need to learn this? And it asks Socratically, well, what do you care about? And let's say the student says, I want to be a professional athlete. And it says, well, learning about the size of cells, which is what this video is on, that could be really useful for understanding nutrition and how your body works, etc. It can answer questions, it can quiz you, it can connect it to other ideas. You can now ask as many questions of a video as you could ever dream of. So,
Okay, let me just stop this video. We're just still running in the background. 1 second. Okie dokie. So this was a little addition. So you can see that this also is being developed in the world of biology and math. And to finish this off, before we go more in discussion, hopefully, I will go back to sharing some more notes on what this means from a kind of top-down perspective. So let's see if I can share this again. Here we go. So, of course, if we look at this, we have to ask ourselves kind of what are the risks and what are the potentials of this. So risks. Let's start with the risks. I think we already saw in the chat, right? One of the problems of this type of AI that has exploded, like these generative predictive transformers, GPT, is that it is possible that they make mistakes or hallucinate, right? This is getting better all the time. It is much better now than it was 6 months ago. But the question we have to ask ourselves is it, how do we control the risk of there being some kind of bug in the technology that then all of a sudden teaches things that are wrong to the students? Or what is the textbook standard? Like, what is the version of reality that has been implemented in these chatbots when it comes to teaching? These are huge ethical responsibilities that we have to wrestle with. And this brings us into the subject of AI alignment, right? Another thing you could remark is that these GPT models don't have common sense in the idea, in the meaning that it understands the world from embodied sense, right? Even if you ask the model, do you understand the subject? It doesn't understand it. It has associative reasoning that knows from all the textbooks that it has written, has read and is writing, what a common sense answer would be. So you could argue philosophically that it is highly problematic to expose our young generation to these technologies that actually do not have an embodied sense of being in the world. And this goes further to saying, yeah, actually the way these predictive models work, these GPT models work, is that they don't have causal reasoning. It is a totally different type of intelligence. It doesn't understand from an inherent natural way that this water will fall on my leg and then my leg will hurt. It thinks in connections. It thinks in this essay is similar to this one, to this one, to this one, and this word is similar to this one, and this one, and this one. So it really is not a human mind that we are kind of taming to act like a human one. And of course, this is something that we need to be aware of when we let children have conversations with this in an unsupervised manner, I think. So let's look at the potentials. Potential is, of course, as we heard before, that we're having a democratization of private lessons, one-on-one coaching, that can adapt to the cognitive style, to the learning style of the student. We can have assessment that is much more gradual over long term. And as the AI has this close interaction with the student, we can have a much better understanding of what are the unique cognitive abilities of the student, and where does the student need more tutoring, maybe even than with a person. And it allows teachers, yes, let's talk about teachers in real schools, to spend their time differently. It allows them to have more social interactions in between the students, have problem solving, situational learning, where the students do projects, and the entire kind of grind part of the educational system could be largely be taken over by a co-creation between AI and teachers, whereas AI's work is teaching assistants and also grading assistants, enabling the teachers to really spend more time with their students. Right, so to finish this off, maybe take one last peek on the blue model, right? It was mentioned in the video we saw from Khan Academy. So Benjamin Bloom is this highly regarded learning theorist. And what we saw in the video was this very important point that in all these studies by Benjamin Bloom, it became very clear that a one-on-one tutoring situation with a teacher that makes the learning topic relevant to the student and asks him questions, teasing out where the errors in understanding are, and motivates him, relates the subject matter to the student, is really where the sweet spot is for rapid learning, right? Because what we're talking about here is the taxonomy of learning. What the current school system really focuses on, if you go to high school, right, is remembering and maybe understanding. So if you have just the standardized texts where you have to just fill the boxes, basically it all happens in these two quadrants, remembering and explaining. But where the real magic happens, and that's why at Ubiquity we have creative assignments, and also, of course, always the impetus to connect what you've learned to your personal experience and write about that, is the integration of the learning in a much more holistic way. So for that, you don't only need to apply the work, you need to analyze it and evaluate it so you can create. I believe that the current educational system, especially in elementary school and high school, is being dragged down by having to spend a lot of time on remembering and understanding in an extremely ineffective model, which is the sage on the stage model, which, as we know, is bad for boys. It is bad for certain kids with special cognitive styles, even talents. It really benefits a few who are naturally adapt to that model in their way of thinking and learning. What if we could compress and kind of optimize the part of remembering and understanding, so that then the classroom can really be kind of reversed, as they say, and be focused on applying, analyzing, and evaluating. And if we have a classroom and a grading system that's based on that, right, we have a total state change of the educational system, where we really can foster problem-solving skills, creative thinking, personal development, meaning also social and emotional development in stages to include larger perspectives on life, which this is all about. If we think of education, not just in preparing people to be workers in a cubicle, but to be creative agents in a complex world. So I'll leave it with that and hope we can now engage in a little conversation on this subject.
Thank you, Georg. Thank you very much. That was very informative. I love the TED Talk presentation by the founder of Khan Academy. He's a very thoughtful man. And I want to encourage anyone out there in our global audience that is an educator who wants to weigh in to do so. I see Cuff Ferguson is listening to the program. Cuff, if you want to come on and make some comments, I can open up your
yeah. Just raise your hand if you have the functionality. There is the button called raise hand. If you
raise your hand and we can bring you in.
There's Kurt Kruger. Let's see what he has to say.
Let me
I'm promoting Kurt to panelist. Let's see.
Are you doing that, Georg?
Yeah, I think I'm doing it.
And Cuff, I'd love to hear what your remarks would be.
It says Pat had a question for Georg earlier. Let's see. Let's go through the. There's a Q&A thing here. What, Pat? Can you rewrite your question? See what you were asking.
Pat Haber, I know that you do a lot of education, so I would love to have you comment because you're always very, very thoughtful. I can promote you as well. But let me just make a couple of comments of my own as an educator as we get going here. As you all know, I'm the primary founder of Ubiquity University. Along with some colleagues, I came into the education space back in 2005 and had a vision of establishing a global learning community that we experimented with for a number of years. And then in 2012, we took the next step and founded Ubiquity University. And that has been essentially my life's work since then with Peter Mary and Jim Hickman and a number of people that were there sort of at creation. And we really realized that the educational system that we all experience is fundamentally a broken educational system. And as Georg was saying, shaped largely by the Industrial Revolution and the need for standardization, rote memorization, a technological proficiency, sort of an assembly line model of economics. And so education became highly technical. And as Georg was saying in his last slide, with Bloom's taxonomy, really geared to data processing. How well can you memorize information that you can regurgitate on a test? And this was in the face of accumulated data worldwide, that when students memorize information for a test, they forget about 80% of what they memorized within 30 days. And so what we've been doing at Ubiquity is reframing the entire foundation of education. And we chose Plato's notion of truth, beauty, and goodness. That people, all of us, young and old, need to have some capacity to understand what the truth is. And in our view, truth is most fundamentally discerned not by the accumulation of facts, but through dialogue. I believe that the ancient mystics were correct, that truth is much more subtle and nuanced than a fact. And so through a dialogic modality that is essentially collaborative, truth can be discerned. And what one discovers is that we're a bunch of blind people around an elephant trying to figure out the elephant. So there's a deep sharing in truth, because truth is multifaceted. You have beauty, an appreciation of beauty. And this is what led Pythagoras to coin the term cosmos, that if you look at the universe, you look at nature, it's intensely beautiful. And that's what we call self-mastery. How do we enhance our capacity to be more fully human? Because the more human we are, the more beautiful we are, and the more in alignment we are with the larger ecosystem and natural processes. Art imitates nature, as Aristotle pointed out. And so the cultivation of beauty is a fundamental aspect of the pedagogy at Ubiquity University. And then thirdly is goodness. What you know and how you sculpt yourself into something more beautiful has to have an effect in the real world. To do good in the world, to act compassionately and with empathy, particularly to those who are suffering. And to my mind, as an educator, if education was around truth, beauty, and goodness, around indigenous wisdom, around appreciating critical thinking and leadership, and diversity and respect for difference, the tools, and this is what Noel Munson said on Friday, and what Salman Khan was saying about the Khan Academy, that AI and all technology is a very useful tool for humans that are motivated by higher order principles as they go up Bloom's taxonomy from, remembering to understanding to analysis, finally to creation. And so I think that the educational process needs its own radical reformation and revolution. And if that takes place, both the teachers and the students will very naturally know how to use Chat GPT, because it's within a larger framework of elevated humanity. And it's because we've so degraded humanity that our technology is having such a disruptive and such a pernicious effect, because our technology won't be any different than we are. And if we bear that in mind as a fundamental reality, then I think we'll put the attention where we need on the human being, so that technology remains the servant and never becomes the master. There's much more that I can say on that, but I just thought I would contribute that one little nugget of reflection. And then let's start with you, Kat, and listen to whatever you have to say, and then Catherine, and then Kurt, and then we'll have Georg comment on all of the above.
Okay, a couple of observations. The scale of problems that we're facing on the planet today are massive, overwhelming, confusing. We have been approaching them on a linear way of trying to put our fingers in the dikes. The internet has connected us in a global way to communicate with many more, but still we're doing individual problem solving. It is possible that young people, when given a challenge and understand the scope of a problem, that they could bring a new kind of digital nativity to the solution. And I think that AI could be an accelerant of that. The challenge is garbage in, garbage out. When you have unethical information being fed into a system and that system processes it and shoots out a response, I'm wondering if we have had too much disinformation and misinformation and nefarious ethics to be able to manage. And as it was stated in the chat, over 1,000 people have of reputable request have asked that we slow down AI. I don't know that that's possible. It feels like the genie is out of the bottle. People are so stoked about having the ability to generate massive response to questions that they didn't even know they had. I mentioned Moonshot Pirates. The person who started that challenge in 2019, last year had 1,300 teens of global change makers in that experience. He used AI this year and has 1,900. So the ability to generate many, many more responses is available. Think of my own little community here in Vail, Colorado. We have many resources, and yet there is a big bifurcation between the poorer workers who live 60 miles away from where all the wealth is generated. We've been looking at mobility, housing, poverty, food, wages, all of the problems that any community that has, how to solve them. And we have very committed, enlightened, educated people trying to solve these problems. I'm wondering, what might our school system be able to support if all of a sudden the kids were let go of their standardized learning and formed in pods of, okay, you are in a Latino community and you live in a mobile home with 3 other families, bad water, the owner of the land is not going to fix it, solve this problem. What kind of energy and solutions and community might we build if we freed up the mental capacity of our young people in that way, and then we're supported with real world information from locally generated AI solutions? That's all.
Oh, thank you, Kat. That's very, very powerful. Education really is unleashing collaborative creativity. Is the bottom line, I think, as you're saying. Catherine, love to hear from you, and then we'll hear from Cuff, and then Kurt.
So it's sort of a segue from what Kat was saying. I love the thrilling thought of changing education. I've been working on that for 20 some odd years. It would be really lovely to see a difference. But the reality is that we act like there's nobody else in the world but us who have this wonderful thinking, and that's not really true. We're certainly seeing a lot of that. So my question really is, what are the safeguards? How would we discern if people who wanted to keep the status quo, who resisted the change, which is a lot, I mean, that's exactly what we're in. We're in a lot of people who are resisting the changes that need to happen. And they're very well heeled. They've got money. They can do all sorts of things. So what's to stop them from creating an AI or a chatbot that just churns and that just keeps people within the framework that they want to keep? How would you tell? How would you know? How could you manage that? Are we looking at that at all? Or are we just so enthralled with all the things we can do, which is usual, that we're up here and not really thinking about that? I think that's what that, let's slow it down. And when we get into teaching, this might really force teachers to teach thinking and discernment, which would be a good thing. But we have to have teachers who can do that. So there's a building that needs to happen for that foundation to be there. And Jim, I want to talk about truth, beauty, and goodness for just a minute, because truth for me is really embodied. That's where you know it. It's not here. It's really in your body. Your body knows. So to Georg's thing that this is not causal learning. So if children are trained to associate outside of their body and don't have that foundation, then what do we get? That doesn't feel really very good to me. And for me, beauty is about integrity. That's why it is beautiful, is because in nature, all the players are in integrity. And that's what shows up then is beauty. We fabricate beauty in lots of ways for physical, visual things without that sense. And that's where the body piece comes back again. And goodness, I have learned through my ethics stuff that anybody who has a certain ethic has a sense of goodness, and it can be diametrically opposed to somebody else's. So that's kind of really, for me, a very fuzzy place. I can see AI contributing to all of those, but for me, that's not the issue. The contribution is a given, the protections are not, and I'm not hearing anything about that. How do we discern? How do we manage to prevent the corruption that is just waiting in the wings to happen? I mean, other people are going, hello, yes, now we can do what we really want to do. So I'd love some thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yeah, very good points, Catherine. And it's reminding me just to bring in what Kim was saying, Kerrigan was saying earlier about how our young people are suffering at every conceivable level and way with depressions and anxieties and self-hurting and all kinds of, suicide statistics, as we all know. If you're deploying AI with increasing force and with broken people, young people whose brains aren't even fully formed yet, with no reform in the educational system, what can we expect except for disaster? And that's something. Thank you for bringing that in, Kim, because I think people are very frail right now. All of us are very fragile and easily destabilized, so that this notion of Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak and 1,000 other tech leaders saying, listen, folks, let's at least slow down, I think is very prudent wisdom in this moment. And for all the reasons I think we all know. So thank you for those comments, Catherine. Dr. Ferguson.
Thank you, Jim. It's interesting because I actually just had 2 conversations around AI in the last couple of days, which were kind of fascinating. One was with one of my classes, and because they're involved right now with writing papers.
Oh,
and
do you let them use Chat GPT?
Well, what I said to them was that we were having a conversation about Chat GPT. And I said to them, well, we have a plagiarism policy on the books, and I know you're writing. So, you're welcome to use whatever resources, but just make sure you reference it, which maintains the integrity of where the sources come from. And is consistent with our plagiarism policy. The other conversation I had was actually with the psychology department. And in that conversation, we were talking about symposiums that we were brainstorming about possible symposiums. And I found myself saying at that point, I would be interested in having a symposium on AI and the impact on the development of our psyches, because it has a profound impact on how we begin to think about who we are. And there's no conversation that's going on right now about the impact on our psyches as a human species. So I'd welcome that kind of conversation. So that came into the focus as we were talking about possible symposiums. Then I found myself today thinking about an article I wrote way back in 1997, which had to do with a new paradigm for learning. And there were assumptions that were built into the old paradigm and the new paradigm. And AI kind of fits into the new paradigm if there are guardrails, that are there. There are about 15 assumptions that were related to the old paradigm and to the new paradigm. And I won't go through all of them right now, but I'll mention a couple of them because they do have relevance for the discussion. One of the assumptions of the old paradigm has to do with of education, has to do with an emphasis on content and acquiring a body of right information once and for all. Whereas the new paradigm is essentially saying, places an emphasis on context and learning how to learn, how to ask questions, how to pay attention to the right things, how to be open to and evaluate new concepts, and how to achieve access to information. So those are two different ways of looking at education. A second one might be that I will focus on is, well, my thoughts are going to an assumption having to do with an old paradigm, having to do with a focus on performance. That's how well you do on tests and so forth. Whereas the new paradigm is actually a focus on self-image as the generator of performance. So how we think about who we are as we are learning things matters in terms of the outcomes that we receive. But there are about 15 of these assumptions, and I'd be happy to share the link to that particular article. But it was written way back in 1997, and at my university, we have been pushing. I had been pushing for a long time, and have been part of a college that was indeed based on a competency-based model. And in that model, we were operating out of the new assumptions, which essentially was that, and putting into effect, and it was working quite well, but higher administration couldn't wrap their brains around it.
Yeah.
So indeed, what essentially has happened is that it got phased out the last 6 years ago. It was phased out as a college at the university. So they still haven't been able to wrap their brains around the new paradigm. So it's fascinating to watch how this unfolds. But in the context of AI, I view this AI is sort of a tool that we can use in healthy ways, and there are also a tool it can be used in not so healthy ways, which is true for almost anything that we as creators create.
Thank you, Cuff. Thank you. So sad that the guys at the top almost never get it.
Yes, that's so true. And one of the things about it is that one of the guys at the top said to me as he was leaving the university, he said, Cuff, I know you've been pushing about high competence-based education. I was just about to bring it back, and then he left.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Cuff. Kurt, what do you have to say on this matter of AI and learning?
Oh boy, everybody mentions about all this intellectual stimulation that we've had with AI and what we do here on Ubiquity. And the one element of it is only mentioned sometimes that is so powerful. And having been a physical educator at universities as well as elsewhere, I know the value of the somatic learning, and everybody needs somatic learning, whether you have this learning style or that learning style. I'll give you an example. We here have all been sitting down, paying attention because we were good students and we know how to focus our minds. Yet, what's happening within our body? We're getting to have our blood flow a little bit less speedily and adroitly and without as much oxygen, which we get when we get our nice little focusing at the start with our breathing, because it's slowed down and so on because of our intellectual gymnastics. But the body, every 15 minutes for little kids, they should be getting up in a classroom and moving. And you can do a cross crawl movement, simple thing, right knee, left elbow. And as you do that, you're breathing out because you're squeezing those lungs. And as you breathe in, you're standing up. And the opposite, and you do this cross crawl, that balances your neocortex. The synapse of the brain occurs. We open the learning centers in it. And it also oxygenates the blood. And the brain uses more oxygen than any other organ in your body. Lord knows it needs it. It's a hot computer, so to speak. But, and another, well, I'm going to put in that chat type of a thing, but the learning groups are oftentimes siloed. So this person has this learning, and so I'm on my computer, I've got my tutor, I'm in my own little silo. The important growth in anything is the collaboration of nature, is the collaboration of this kind and this difference and that difference, so that we actually thrive better because of that community. We commune, and that community is a thing that human beings thrive in, and Mother Nature does too. We model it after nature because we are nature. We know that, but a lot of times in our discussions, we leave that issue out and don't discuss it so much. So I loved it. You might have seen me move a lot while I was on site, because this body, I mean, I was one of those kids at the back of the room looking out the window, so to speak, because I had ants in my pants and I learned a different way. But I still passed. I got good enough grades to get to college and graduate and masters and teach at universities and so on and so forth. But it has to be embodied. And when we are that, it's the peacemaker. We are all peacemakers when we've got that holistic approach, that systems approach that was mentioned so early. The systems is what is nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. I see Cherry Stover. Cherry, good to see you. What comment would you like to make on this subject? You're on mute.
Put your mic on, please.
Okay, am I there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have this on a second computer in the other room. I'm going to have to go turn it off. Are you getting feedback from it?
No.
Okay. But I am. Hang on just a second.
And after Cherry Cat, I would love to have you say a little bit more about your training. You're going to go through a 3-day training for GPT. That's going to be extraordinary. I'd love to hear more about that. But go ahead, Cherry.
Okay, so I've tutored math, and I'm in Tucson, Arizona, which is not a terribly affluent place. And as places go that I've lived, people are not overall all that interested in education. In other words, I've lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I've lived in West Lafayette, Indiana. These places are, the population in general is far more academically oriented. Here it's a much broader spectrum of people. And so some of my kids, a few of my kids, are really interested in learning the topic. And they come to me because their parents care about education and they've landed with a bad teacher. And because they've landed with a bad teacher, the parents say, well, let's get them a tutor. And those kids probably would do pretty well with AI help because they want to learn and they want to do well. And they blossom with a private tutor because they love the one-on-one attention. But most of the kids that come to me because they don't want anything to do with the topic to begin with. And you can understand, I mean, this is math, right? I have a bachelor's and master's in religious studies. I didn't hang out a shingle to tutor that. No one was going to hire me to tutor religious studies. People were going to hire me to tutor a topic that kids wanted nothing to do with, right? And so the kids that don't want anything to do with the topic, they are not going to do well with AI, because what eventually gets them to learn the material in large part is that I develop a relationship with them. And through the relationship with me, they're willing to show up, they're willing to focus, they're willing to pay attention because of the interaction. And you can't duplicate that, I don't think, with AI. It's just not going to happen. There's also going to still probably be ways to game the system. At least with, I mean, I've certainly seen many computer-related math programs, and there's online learning where, you know, especially in the universities now, those first few university math courses where the students are taking college algebra or college, sort of that one pass this math course and check the box for your college degree scenario. And some of those now are online. And a student could, in theory, go through that and have someone help them with it. And I mean, I've certainly been paid to help and get through it without really knowing the topic. So there's, you know, that's already here as a reality. And I've got a story that just came up. I'm on a Facebook group with a guy that is a linguist here. So he teaches linguistics and he's a deep thinker when it comes to education. In fact, he used to be dean of the graduate school here for 10 years up until January when he stepped down. And he's taking the semester off, but he's still teaching a folk dancing course, which is how I know him, is through folk dancing. And he had something going in his face, a thread going in his Facebook page about a student who he had in folk dancing that was Korean. And he said the guy's English was so bad that he could scarcely follow the instructions, move left, move right, put your foot forward, you know, to do a dance. And yet he assigned these kids a paper. And the kid turned in a paper in perfect English, beautiful grammar about Korean dance. And so there was this long thread between him and all these other educators, you know, who are part of his Facebook group about how is he going to deal with this, not just with this one student, but going forward. And apparently there are translators out there, so that in theory, the kid could have written the paper on his own in Korean, and then used a translator to translate it through to English. But maybe not. Maybe he just typed in the prompts and the paper popped out and he turned it in. And one of the suggestions was that then the teachers have to one-on-one interview the students about the content of the paper. And I mean, this clearly would, you know, provide a way to tell who didn't know what they were talking about, but it's very time consuming. And so it changes the whole nature of education back more to that one-on-one. And that comes with its own set of problems. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on the topic.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That story is the problem, is the dilemma. and how we understand it and navigate forward is going to be very, very interesting. We're beginning to run short on time, but Kat, tell us a little bit about your 3-day training on Chat GPT, and then Georg, summarize and round it off for us.
I put the information in the chat. I'd really love to hear what Georg has to say after this conversation.
Okay, cool. Georg.
Yeah, thank you all for your input. It's been very rich, and I love that we open up Humanity Rising, have more of this community aspect on such a subject. I think there's not too much to add. I firmly believe that this application of one-on-one tutoring is a game changer. And I have 2 kids. One will go to elementary school next year, right? So I believe that in elementary school, this shouldn't be applied. It's not the right subject. As Kurt, you said, it's in elementary school, it should be more about the somatic education. Kids have to learn for themselves without any help, how to do arithmetic, how to write by hand, right? This is all improvement. This is crucial. And there should be as less technology involved as possible. But then as we go to high school, right, and children are introduced into the information sphere of the internet, and they have classes on computer science sooner than later, we have to understand that this entire AI thing breaks down the barrier between programming language in English, because the computer understands the grammar. And there's an important article by a Swedish philosopher called Hansi Freinacht that says only grammar can save us. Only if we have like a total alignment between syntax and semantics and understand how to write in a concise way so the computer understands what we actually want it to do and it doesn't do any weird stuff we don't want it to do, we can control AI. And this requires a very deep Socratic dialogue, Jim. So all of a sudden, English education or German is computer science. It is the same thing, right? And this is an important thing that inside I think has not dawned on too many people yet. If you saw how this tutor was built, it was not written thousands of lines of code as you would have done before. It was written in plain English. Use this, use this, use this, do that, do that, do that. And it could run this. And it could run it on thousands, millions of places at the same time. There's no limitation to it. So I ideally hope that my kids can have a fruitful relationship to this AI tutor. And it's definitely a killer application that will be tried to be controlled by a lot of interests. And it's really the core question is, what are the ethical guidelines of this AI that we will have our children learn, right? Who controls the watcher? Who watches the watcher type of analogy? So that's, I think, what we have to figure out. And the great thing is that there are open source technologies that allow small teams to play with this technology. This is not kind of DARPA stuff that's locked up. It is out there. The EU today made a terrible mistake by regulating AI in a very, very, very restrictive way. It looks like it will be close to impossible to do anything with AI in the European Union without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers. But other places on the world, like the third world, that would be a subject on its own, Jim. But other places like the third world, and I think the third world is really going to profit most of it, because they have like a clean slate to have these type of tutors that can help them do great things. So that's kind of my hope. And there are people like from Stability AI who are actually working on this. Like they want to put this type of technology in a solar-powered laptop that can then speak to these kids, teach them English, teach them also math and science, and it's pretty clear that this will work. Yeah, so that's the potential.
Thank you so much, Georg. This is such a potentiated moment in human history, and this subject is so important to delve into as deeply as we possibly can. So I want to really thank you and thank all of you for taking this time to just come on as panelists. We'll try to be doing that more as we proceed. But that'll bring us to a close for today with a lot to ponder. As Georg just said, when English or German, when the language we speak is the language that the computers speak, and it's not about a bunch of coding, that revolutionizes our relationship with our technology in literally Copernican ways. And we all need to take it in. So we're going to be returning to this subject often because this is a revolution whose impact is going to affect each and every one of our daily lives and the shape of the human future. So thank you, Georg, for bringing this to our attention and helping to shape.
Thank you, Jim. I mean, just
program.
one last note on what you just said. This Copernican revolution is a great point, because in this AI dilemma talk that most of you maybe have seen by Tristan Harris, if you have not, please Google it. It's called AI Dilemma. It's kind of a 40-minute tour de force on the impact of AI.
Hugely important.
So if you put AI Dilemma into YouTube, you will find it. It's gone viral. And one of the most prescient points they're making in it is that AI is maybe something like the invention of optics was for modernity. All of a sudden, we can see that the stars are not just moving around us. All of a sudden, we can see that germs actually exist with the microscope, with the telescope, right? And it totally changes our perspective to the world, and it makes us rethink what our places in the world as language and reasoning is not primary a human feature. And that's also what some of you said, right? This shock, it has been called now the ontological shock of humans not being, right, anymore divinely gifted with the ability to think and make sense. Right? This is over. So what do we do with it? And how do we apply that to education?
Well, on that very astonishing challenge to us all, I'll bid you a good day. Thank you and good night, as they say. Thank you, Georg. Thank you, Kurt and Cuff and Cherry and Catherine and Kat for this very stimulating dialogue. And that'll bring us to a close. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to go back to Israel, and we're going to get an update on the struggles, the political struggles in Israel and the Israeli relationship with the Palestinians. That'll be tomorrow.